When I was young, a man came to our shop. My grandpa smiled and said, "Sorry, young man. We're hosting a wedding banquet today. No seats left." The man spoke in a grim tone. "There's a zombie in the shop." My grandpa was stunned for a few seconds. He said, in broad daylight, "How could there be a zombie? Besides, everyone here is from the village. I know every face. There's no stranger here." As soon as my grandpa finished speaking, the man stared at the bride. She was sitting in the corner, her head covered with a red veil. My grandpa whispered, "Young man, it's her wedding day. Don't ruin the celebration. Our village is small, and everyone's practically family. You better leave." The man said urgently, "Uncle, I'm not here to cause trouble. There's really a zombie in the shop. Zombies are afraid of sunlight. While it's still bright out, we can get rid of it. But if we wait until nightfall, everyone in the village could be killed." The man's tone didn't sound like he was lying. My grandpa hesitated for a few seconds, then said, "All right, young man, take a look around the shop, but don't disturb the guests. It's their big day after all." The man nodded and walked around the shop twice. My grandpa whispered, "Did you find the zombie?" The man shook his head. "No." My grandpa breathed a sigh of relief and laughed. "I told you, it's broad daylight. How could there be a zombie?" Before my grandpa could finish, the man asked, "Uncle, how did the bride get inside?" My grandpa frowned. He said, "Usually, the groom carries the bride inside so her feet don't touch the ground. But Tony hurt his back, so he couldn't carry her. He asked 4 young men to lift her inside." The man furrowed his brow, his face turning pale. He said, "It took 4 young men to carry a bride? She must be pretty heavy." As he spoke, his eyes never left the bride. My grandpa asked, "Young man, what do you mean by that?" The man squinted and whispered, "I suspect the bride is the zombie." The moment he said that, my grandpa burst into laughter. "Young man, I saw a zombie with my own eyes when I was little. Zombies don't think. They attack the living as soon as they see them. They wouldn't just sit quietly among people." The man kept his eyes fixed on the bride. He said, "What if there's a talisman stuck to her head?" The words barely left his mouth when my grandpa's eyes widened in panic. His voice trembled. No way. We're all from the same village. If there really is a zombie, no one would be able to escape." The man squinted and said nothing. He walked towards the bride but was stopped by Tony when he got about a meter away. Tony had drunk quite a bit, and his words were slurred. He pointed at the man and asked, "Who the hell are you? I saw you wandering back and forth, staring at my wife. What? You trying to steal her?" As soon as Tony finished speaking, everyone at his table stood up, looking like they were ready to beat the man to death. The man kept a stern face and said, "I'm not here to steal anyone. There's a zombie in the shop, and I suspect it's the bride." The moment he said that, Tony pointed at him and cursed, "You son of a bitch, your wife's the zombie. I bet you came here just to start trouble. I'll beat you to death." Tony was just about to make a move when my grandpa squeezed through the crowd with a forced smile. He said, "Tony, it's your big day. You really shouldn't spill blood, it's bad luck." Tony snorted and said impatiently, "Uncle Kyle, it's my wedding, and I came to your shop out of respect for our village, but why are you letting just anyone in? What a damn nuisance." My grandpa chuckled awkwardly and said, "This young man means well. If there really is a zombie, we'd all be in trouble." Tony curled his lip and said dismissively, "There's no drought or disaster. How could there be a zombie? He's just a liar. Get him out of here." My grandpa forced a smile and said, All right, I'll get him out of here." After saying that, he began pulling the man toward the door, but the man wouldn't budge. He stood there, staring intently at the bride. Tony shoved the man hard and shouted angrily, "You son of a bitch! If you dare look at her again, I'll gouge your eyes out!" The man glared back at Tony and snapped, "I came here following my compass. There's a zombie in this place. While it's still daylight, I can destroy it. But when night falls, no one within 100 miles will survive." Tony growled, "You bastard! Stop trying to scare people. Even if there is a zombie, it can't possibly be my wife. From the moment she left her home until she got here, she's been surrounded by people. How could she be a zombie?" The man, visibly irritated, said, "I've looked at everyone in the shop closely. They're all alive. The only one I couldn't see is the bride under the red veil. If I'm not mistaken, the bride is the zombie. Right now, it's staying quiet because there's a talisman stuck to its head. But once night falls, that talisman won't hold it back anymore. And when that happens, no one will survive. According to the village elders, zombies drain people's blood. Wherever one appears, not a single living person is left within 100 miles. As soon as the man finished speaking, Tony stomped his foot in rage. He shouted furiously, "You piece of shit! How dare you talk nonsense! I'll kill you!" Tony was just about to strike when my grandpa hurriedly stepped in and stopped him. He said, "Tony, calm down. Let's talk this out. It's your big day, don't shed any blood." Tony slammed the table with his hand, pointing at the man and cursing. "It's all because of this son of a bitch. He's here to cause trouble." My grandpa turned to the man and said, "Young man, according to our village traditions, the bride's veil can only be lifted in the bridal chamber. Wanting to lift it now is definitely out of line." The man frowned and replied, "But if we wait until it gets dark, it'll be too late." Before the man could finish, Tony snarled, "Too late? What the hell do you mean by too late? I bet you just came here to stir up trouble. Tell me the truth. Are you Fatima's lover from the city?" Fatima was the only college student in our village. She had been studying in the city, and it was rumored that she had a boyfriend there. But Tony insisted on marrying Fatima, and her family didn't dare to offend him, so they had no choice but to marry her off to Tony. The man's face darkened. "I'm not. Stop talking nonsense." Tony curled his lip, his eyes glimmering with jealousy as he looked at the man. He said, "Fatima is my wife. There were others in the village who wanted to take her from me, but none of them lived long. You're an outsider. You'd better get lost." As soon as Tony finished speaking, Carlos shot him a glare and shouted, "You bastard! Drunk and spewing nonsense! If you keep running your mouth, I'll beat you to death!" People in the village used to say that my uncle and Fatima were close when he was alive. They even planned to go to the same university together. Later, they both got into the same school, but the day before my uncle was supposed to leave, he was found dead in the back hills. His body was stabbed 70 times, and he was mutilated. Tony curled his lip and stayed silent. Carlos, sitting at the main table, spoke in a grim tone. "Young man, according to our village rules, the veil cannot be lifted before the bridal chamber. It's bad luck, but you say there's a zombie here, so for the safety of everyone, I'll make an exception. But let me be clear. If she's really a zombie, you'll be a hero to the entire village. If she's not, then you came here to cause trouble, and you'll have to leave behind both your hands before you go." After Carlos finished speaking, he turned to Tony and said, "Second brother, lift your wife's veil." Before Tony could respond, my grandpa quickly interjected, "Third brother, he's just an outsider. He doesn't understand our village customs. And today is a joyous occasion, let's not stoop to his level." Carlos snorted and said coldly, "I want to see if this little bastard is really here to make trouble. Second brother, lift the veil." Just as Carlos finished speaking, a loud thunderclap shook the room. The glass windows rattled from the impact. The villagers were all stunned and looked outside. In the blink of an eye, the sky had turned dark, looking eerily gloomy. Right after that, heavy rain started pouring, accompanied by a chilling wind that sent shivers down everyone's spine. I suddenly felt a wave of fear, like something terrible was about to happen. My grandpa forced a smile and said, "Third brother, it's bad luck to shed blood on such a joyous day. If you ask me, let's just have the bride say something. As long as she can speak, she's not a zombie." Just as my grandpa finished speaking, a bright flash of lightning streaked across the sky, so dazzling that it hurt to open your eyes. The flash of light illuminated the bride's wedding gown, making it look exceptionally eerie, especially the red veilet was crimson, as if soaked in blood, like she was dressed for a ghost marriage. I hid behind my grandpa, clutching his arm tightly. Carlos grunted and said, "That might actually work." My grandpa chuckled nervously and then turned to the man. "Young man, zombies can't talk. Are you willing to accept this test?" The man frowned and said, "I accept." My grandpa nodded and said, "Tony, have your wife say something." Tony walked over to the bride and smiled. "Honey, say something." As soon as Tony finished speaking, there was a thunderous crack of lightning. The plaster on the shop walls shook and crumbled. The thunder was so close, it seemed to come right from the rooftop. Right after that, the lights inside the shop flickered on and off. The light bulbs made a sizzling noise, and everyone in the village paused, staring up at the ceiling lights. My grandpa chuckled nervously and said, "Rainy weather, loose wiring." The flickering lights cast shadows on my grandpa's face, making him look strangely distorted. Carlos snorted and said gruffly, "If you're running a shop, don't be so stingy. Get better wiring." The wires up in the rafters were the same ones my uncle had replaced back when he was alive. For all these years, my grandpa had been reluctant to change them, as if he still believed my uncle was around. My grandpa nodded with a smile and said, "I'll replace them in a few days." As soon as my grandpa finished speaking, the lights went out. The room plunged into darkness, leaving just enough light to barely see people's faces. The villagers were stunned, instinctively looking up at the lights. Then, out of nowhere, Fatima's voice broke the silence. "Tony." Her voice sounded exactly the same as usual. My grandpa said, "Don't panic, everyone. The bulb blew out. I'll replace it." He climbed onto a stool and changed the bulb. Once the new bulb was in, the room lit up again. Tony snorted and glared at the man. "You son of a bitch! Did you hear that? Now get the hell out of here!" The man's face turned pale. He said, "That voice just know it wasn't the bride." Before he could say another word, Tony jabbed his finger at the man's face and cursed, "You bastard! I gave you some face, and you still want more? That voice was my wife's. Everyone heard it. If you stir up trouble again, I'll kill you." My grandpa glanced at the man and spoke sternly. "Young man, that voice was definitely Fatima's. If you keep causing trouble, there's nothing I can do to help you. You should just leave." The man frowned and said, "Uncle, I was born with sharp ears. Just now, when the lights went out, the voice came from the southwest, but the bride is sitting in the north. That wasn't her voice. Someone's trying to cause trouble, using a zombie to kill people." As soon as the man finished speaking, there was another thunderous crack of lightning. The sound was so loud it made my ears ache. The villagers exchanged glances and whispered among themselves. My grandpa glared at the man and snapped, "Young man, you'd better leave before things get ugly. If you piss off the villagers, you won't be able to walk out of here easily." After saying that, my grandpa started pushing the man toward the door, but the man wouldn't leave. He just stood there, unmoving. The man looked at my grandpa and said, "Uncle, if the zombie isn't destroyed, there won't be a single living soul within 100 miles. My grandpa replied impatiently, "Mind your own business. Leave now." After my grandpa said that, he began pushing the man out of the shop. The man frowned and said, "Zombies can't walk. Let the bride stand up and take a few steps. If she's a living person, I'll leave right away." As soon as the man finished speaking, Tony lost his temper. He cursed viciously. "You bastard! Who the hell do you think you are? Why should we listen to you? I think you just came here to cause trouble." After saying that, Tony grabbed an axe from the floor and swung it at the man. The villagers quickly held Tony back. My grandpa stomped his foot anxiously and said, "Young man, you'd better leave. If you don't, someone's going to get killed." After saying that, my grandpa shoved the man out of the shop and slammed the door shut. Outside, the rain was pouring down, and night was quickly approaching. The man pounded on the door persistently, shouting, "Uncle, there's something wrong with the bride!" Since I walked in, she hasn't moved an inch, like she's frozen in place. She doesn't look like she's alive. Just as he finished speaking, there was a deafening crash of thunder. The rumble was so strong that it made everyone's skin tingle. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, their eyes eventually landing on the bride. Tony scoffed and said, "What are you all looking at my wife for? You all heard her speak just now. How can you believe that bastard's nonsense?" No sooner had Tony finished speaking than the bride's arm twitched. Tony's face lit up with joy. "Did you all see that? My wife just moved her arm." As soon as Tony said that, the man's desperate voice came from outside. "It's getting dark. The talisman is losing its power. Let me in, I can still destroy it." Tony's face twisted with rage. He snarled, "That son of a bitch. I'm gonna cut his tongue out." My grandpa forced a smile and said, "Tony, don't get angry." I can see it. No, he's just a lunatic. Ignore him. Let him shout all he wants. Fatima is such a fine girl. How could she be a zombie? He's just here to cause trouble. Tony nodded and said, "It's my wedding day. I'll let him off this time." After saying that, he sat back down and continued drinking. The villagers went back to eating and drinking, and the shop was once again filled with noise and excitement. My grandpa wore a smile, his eyes fixed on the villagers. The way he looked at them was filled with hatred, almost like he was holding onto a deep grudge. I tugged on his sleeve and said, "Grandpa, I want to hear the birds sing." My grandpa was very talented. He could mimic animal calls, and even imitate human voices so realistically that you couldn't tell the difference. My grandpa patted my head and smiled. "Luke, go upstairs and stay with your grandma. Ever since my uncle died, my grandma had gone insane." My grandpa was afraid she'd get lost, so he locked her up on the second floor. I nodded and said, "Okay." As soon as I finished speaking, there was another crash of thunder. Right after that, the man's voice came from outside. He shouted, "Open the door! There's no time! The sun is about to set." His voice was loud, and the villagers exchanged glances, their faces turning grim. Tony growled, "That son of a bitch is still going?" My grandpa said, "Tony, ignore him. People like that are just crazy." Tony snorted and took 2 big swigs of white liquor. He walked over to the bride with a lecherous grin, then looked around at the villagers and said, "It's getting late. I, Tony, am going to the bridal chamber." As soon as Tony said that, a few young men in the village stood up. Their eyes were gleaming with excitement, staring straight at the bride. One of the young men chuckled and said, "Time to have some fun in the bridal chamber." Tony laughed smugly and said, "Uncle, it's pouring outside, so I can't go home. I'll just borrow your second floor for the night." My grandpa smiled and nodded. "All right, go ahead." As soon as he said that, Tony walked over to pick up the bride. But after several attempts, he still couldn't lift her. The villagers burst into laughter. One of the young men chuckled and said, "Tony, you can't even lift your own bride? Are you even a man?" Tony frowned, clearly irritated, and snapped, "Of course I'm a man!" After saying that, Tony tried again to lift the bride. He gritted his teeth and used all his strength, but the bride didn't move an inch. The villagers were stunned. Their smiles froze on their faces. By all logic, Tony was tall and strong. It shouldn't take much effort for him to lift a bride. But even with all his strength, he couldn't lift her. The villagers exchanged puzzled glances, confusion evident in their eyes. Tony asked, "What's going on?" As soon as the words left his mouth, a bright flash of lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the bride's wedding dress, making it look eerily sinister. The villagers instinctively took a few steps back. Suddenly, the bride's head twitched. Tony visibly panicked and said, "Fatima, say something." There was no response. The room fell silent, so quiet that you could hear people breathing. Tony called out again, "Fatima, say something." Still, there was no answer. Outside, the rain poured down harder, and the cold wind howled, sending chills down everyone's spines. Sweat began to bead on Tony's forehead. He looked at Carlos and asked, "Dad, why isn't Fatima saying anything?" Carlos's face darkened. He stared intently at the bride. Her crimson wedding dress seemed soaked in blood, looking disturbingly eerie. Carlos said, "Fatima, say something. Don't play dumb." But there was still no response. The bride sat in the chair, completely motionless. Carlos started to look uneasy. He forced himself to remain calm and said, "It's not like we're in the middle of a drought or something. There's no way a zombie could appear. Somebody's just playing tricks." No sooner had Carlos finished speaking than another deafening thunderclap shook the room. Right after that, the man's voice shouted from outside, "Open the door! The sun is about to set! Once it's dark, no one can stop it. Everyone within 100 miles is doomed." Tony furrowed his brow and said, "Dad, maybe we should let him in. Let him lift the veil. If she's really a zombie, we can just burn it." Carlos's eyes darted back and forth before he finally said, "Open the door." As soon as Carlos gave the order, a few young men opened the shop door. The man walked in, completely soaked from the rain, water dripping from his clothes. Carlos said, "Young man, come over here and take a look." The man frowned, then walked up to the bride and stared at her intently. He moved behind her and lifted the veil from the back. The moment the veil was lifted, everyone saw a zombie sitting in the chair. A talisman was stuck to its forehead, and it was barely hanging on. The zombie's eyes twitched unnervingly, and it let out a guttural growl from its throat. The villagers were stunned, their eyes wide with terror. Carlos's voice trembled as he shouted, "Quick! Get rid of the zombie!" Just as he finished speaking, a gust of cold wind blew in from outside, strong enough to rip the talisman right off the zombie's head. The villagers screamed in fear, scrambling for the door. The zombie's eyes twitched again, and it stared coldly at the people in the shop. The man froze for a few seconds, then pulled out a peachwood sword. Just as he was about to stab the zombie from behind, it lunged and bit into his neck, tearing it apart. The zombie clamped down, blood spraying everywhere. The villagers were terrified out of their minds, stumbling and crawling as they fled the shop. My grandpa grabbed me, rushed upstairs, and locked the door behind us. I clung tightly to my grandpa's clothes, terrified beyond words. The zombie was horrifying, especially its teeth. My grandpa scattered glutinous rice at the doorway, then whispered to my grandma, "Old woman, don't make a sound. There's a zombie downstairs." My grandma seemed to understand. She curled up on the clay bed, silent, her eyes darting back and forth. I couldn't tell what she was thinking. My grandpa said, "Even if it costs all of our lives, I will avenge Jack." Jack was my uncle's name. As soon as my grandpa finished speaking, I heard a thump-thump sound coming from downstairs, the distinct sound of a zombie hopping as it moved. My grandpa carefully walked to the door and scattered a few handfuls of glutinous rice at the entrance. The rice instantly turned black upon contact with the floor, releasing wisps of dark smoke. My grandpa's face changed immediately. He said, "This zombie is fierce. It won't be easy to deal with." As soon as he said that, we heard a thud, sound clear and heavy like footsteps jumping up the stairs. My grandpa hurriedly dragged a wooden crate to block the door, but the door shook and thumped loudly under the impact. Sweat beaded on my grandpa's forehead. He piled everything he could find against the door, but the door kept shaking. Each hit louder than the last. Through the crack in the door, I saw the zombie standing right outside. Its arms were stretched out straight, its skin a deathly grayish green, and its mouth filled with sharp, blood-stained teeth. It was terrifying. The zombie's eyes were sunken, with only black pupils remaining in the sockets, exuding a chilling darkness. My eyes met the zombie's. It sensed my presence and stared straight at me, its throat emitting a low, guttural growl. Hoo. Suddenly, it crashed into the door with great force, scattering everything that was blocking it. My grandpa gritted his teeth, holding the door with all his strength, refusing to let the zombie break through. My grandma was sitting on the clay bed. It seemed like she had regained her senses. She looked at my grandpa and said, "Old man, soak yourself with water. Zombies can't smell the scent of the living if you're wet." My grandpa's forehead was dripping with sweat. He shouted, "Luke, hide in the water tank, quick!" I hurriedly jumped into the water tank, soaking myself completely. Then I climbed back out, dripping wet. My grandpa gritted his teeth and said, "Old woman, get in the tank. I can hold it off for a while longer." My grandma, visibly panicked, quickly got into the water tank and soaked herself before climbing back out. She ran to my grandpa's side, pushing against the door with her hands. She shouted, "Old man, you need to get in the water tank too!" As soon as she finished speaking, the door was slammed again with tremendous force.